Okay, so we have 25 participants. I will let people in constantly as long as they will try to connect to our seminar, but I think that we can start. So I would like to welcome everybody to this seminar, which is a part of the seminar series, Contested Heritage, Memory and Identity Practices, Eastern European and Global Contexts. And firstly, I would like to inform you that this seminar is being recorded, and you will be able to find the recording after a bit of time on the YouTube channel of Vilnius University Faculty of Communication. I would also like to remind a few rules which I kindly ask you to follow. Firstly, keep your microphones muted during the talk due to proper hearing of the lecturer. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, or you can also ask them live after the presentation during the discussion session. And let's try not to interrupt each other and respect all the participants. And maybe firstly, I would like Professor Kostas Dallas to say a few words about the project, which is the main reason why we are all here on this lecture today.
Well, thank you, Donata, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm just going to be very, very brief because this is actually our second seminar. It's part of this seminar series this year, in which what we try to do, we try to introduce and bring together perspectives from outside Lithuania, European perspectives, also global perspectives on issues that relate with heritage, memory, and identity, together with the intuitions and the dialogue and the ideas of a Lithuanian research community that is interested in these areas. The Connective Digital Memory in the Borderlands project, it is a 3.5 year project that is organized with European funds under the auspices of the Lithuanian Research Council by the Faculty of Communication of Vilnius University. I'm honored to be the principal investigator of this project, working with an extremely talented and knowledgeable team of transdisciplinary team of researchers from Vilnius University. What we're trying to look at is how practices of memory that take place on social media, especially on Facebook, Instagram, and VKontakte, engage with ideas and notions and figurations of cultural heritage and of the difficult past, and at the same time shape contemporary notions of identity: national, subnational, transnational identity, translocal identities, intersectional identities in contemporary, related to contemporary Lithuania. So we're interested in different aspects of memory and identity, but what we want is really, this is the kind of project that we do, is to see how the communicative action that takes place on social media shapes these notions of both what the past is, what the stories of the past are, and how, and this shaping also influences and somehow co-determines in many ways how people feel about themselves, identity, and authority, who they are and who are others. So this is more or less the project, and this is the set of seminars that we're organizing this year is organized by Donata Armakauskaite, who's just talked to you before, and she no doubt will take care of the rest of the seminar today. And then Donata is one of the researchers in the project. She's a doctorand student. She's finishing her PhD dissertation this year, and she's looking at the issues that she will tell you about if she's asked, but certainly I know that she's very much interested in practices of commemoration and memory that take place through materiality, through museum collections, and through museum practices. So how museum practices and institutional practices come together with other grassroots understandings, with audiences and visitors and co-shape somehow notions of heritage and identity. That's her interest in the project. Each of us has got their own interests. We're planning to produce a monograph at the end, a proposal for a monograph, and set out the wheels in order to get a monograph published internationally at the end of the project. Currently, you find us at the time in which we are furiously collecting data and starting, examination and the analysis of those data on social media. So we won't have much to tell you about the results of our project, at least for a few months or a year more. But you will hopefully be interested enough in our work in order to join our next seminars and the seminar afterwards. We're planning quite a few in this year, and we'll be happy to stay in touch with you and involve you in future activities of the project. That being said, thank you, and I want to thank, before everything else, of course, Agiatis Benardou, Dr. Benardou. She's a dear friend, a dear collaborator for many years in another life, in another sort of terrain in which I've been sort of working with. But I will just hand back the microphone to Donata so that she introduces her properly and introduces so that she introduces today's topic and theme. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. As Kostas already mentioned, we are happy to present our lecturer, today's lecturer, Agiatis Benardou. She is a postdoctoral fellow at the Athens University of Economic and Business, and also a senior researcher at the Athena Research Center. She has also lots of experience working with the colleagues from universities all over the world, like Glasgow University, University of California, Berkeley, and other institutions. So welcome, Agiati. I would like to add a few things that Agiati is particularly interested in the ways in which digital tools and methods can provide new gateways throughout which research communities gain access to create, revisit, and repurpose research data, processes, and infrastructures, which is very important for today's lecture. And today, Agiati will introduce us to one of the projects, which includes difficult heritage object, immersive technologies, and a lot of other interesting aspects. So Agiati, here's the scene, and we are really anxious to hear about Block 15 of the Haidari Concentration Camp.
Thank you. Thank you, Donata, for the invitation. Thanks, Kostis, as well, a dear friend. That's very true. Well, before I begin, I will have to make a disclaimer. I see amongst our participants Dr. Anna Maria Drumbouki. I should say that she is a very close collaborator with me on the project I'm about to present. She is the chief historical investigator in the project. As you'll see, there is a very strong aspect of historical and archival research in this, and I have to say publicly that this is a rescheduled lecture. It was due to take place last month, but things got mixed up due to COVID and the holidays coming up. Anna Maria was invited in the original lecture, so basically she's glad to attend. Yes, hi, Anna Maria. Basically, if anything slips, if anything goes wrong in my historical interpretation of the site I'm about to present, she's here to set the record straight. She's the person dealing with difficult heritage in Greece, especially in the 1940s, during the German occupation, so she's an expert on that. Other than this, my collaboration with Anna Maria goes beyond the project, and as you will see, and I'm about to share my screen, let me do that straight away. The title of this talk, I suppose you can see my screen, Donata, can't you?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Let me move things around a bit because for some reason what's going on? I can see windows of participants right in the middle of my screen. Can you see that too?
Now we can see your presentation, actually.
Oh, that's fine. I can do it. I can do it without actually looking at the slides. Basically, as you can see, the title of my talk is Commemorating Difficult Heritage Through Immersive Technologies, and in particular, the case of Block 15 of the concentration camp in Haidari. So I'll let you know all about it. But as I was about to say just before, this is the title of a book coming up with more or less the title of a book coming up on Routledge publications with Anna Maria Droubuki. So basically, this is work that we have been carrying out for a while now, not just within the time frame and the limits of this project. Just a few background theory, just so that we are all on the same page. Although, as you said, Donata, there are people coming in from the museum sector, so I suppose this is not news to you. Difficult heritage is a term coined by Sharon MacDonald, the famous anthropologist. It was coined in 2007. Basically, as you can see, this is the actual definition or description, how should I put it? Basically, what Sharon MacDonald was saying was that difficult heritage is any histories that challenge our identities, our perceptions of the past, and basically make us feel uncomfortable about where we are, where we were, and where we're going in terms of culture and in terms of our association with heritage. So it's anything that has to do with trauma, anything that has to do with war, casualties, anything that has to do with guilt, and all those things. Many things come to mind: genocides, wars, and so on and so forth. This building, and this is a picture taken by Anna Maria Droubuki for her PhD a while ago. This is a building that basically lies within an active army camp in the western part of Attica. It's called Block 15 because that's a number it took, and it's still standing. It's more or less like you see it right now. It's actually been renovated in the past years. And if you're wondering where exactly this is, I'll show you just a grab of Google Maps. It's not very enlightening, but you can see Athens right there. Those of you who've been know exactly where we are in terms of the country. And Haidari is sort of to the northwest of the area. It's just, say, kilometers from like the nominal center of the city. So basically, that stands within an army camp that's located very near Athens. There's the building again. Situation like now there. So despite the fact that, as you know, I suspect in Lithuania it's more or less the same, the German occupation, which in Greece spanned for the years between 1944, it's been central to public debates and public discussions, and it's also inspired, artistic expressions, creative displays, performances, and the like. The sites of memory of the Second World War in Greece are quite invisible. What I mean by that, they're not open to the public in the way that we'd like to see them. People don't know about them, and people don't visit them, and they are in fact not a part of the city, the urban network at all in terms of culture. So you can't really see them. So it's, while they're there and they're standing, we don't know where they are, most of us. I mean, the average Athenian doesn't know where they are, what their function was during the occupation years, and what their actual significance really was. So Block 15 was a solitary confinement building within the area of Haidari. As I said, it's now an active army camp. Back in those years, 43 to 44, Haidari functioned as a concentration camp. So there was an active concentration camp in the area of Athens that modern Athenians don't really know about. And it has been declared a monument by the Greek Ministry of Culture, but in fact, it's not open to visitors. Why is it not open to visitors? Because it's part of the active camp right now, and also because there are some restrictions to coming and going within the camp, especially right now due to COVID. So we're dealing with a difficult heritage site that's in fact entangled in quite a few other difficulties aside of its actual, meaning and the notions that it signifies. So I was very kindly invited here to talk about our project, and it's a project on immersive experiences, applying immersive technologies to make Block 15 known to the and its history known to the wider public. I'm not going to give you a lecture about what immersive technologies really entail or what they really are, but I can say very quickly, for those of you that just need a bit of freshening up their memories, that these technologies are anything that has to do with blurring the lines between reality and our real perception of things around us and the virtual world. So it's not just VR, it could be VR, AR, AI, they could be, a sort of intriguing of the senses, even olfactory or smelling things. You call them as you like. It can get as state of the art as budget, time, and experience of developers can take us. What we're talking here in our Block 15 project is in fact an interactive virtual reality production. So this is a project that's hosted by the Department of Informatics at the Athens University of Economics and Business, widely called AWEB. It's funded by the Greek-German Fund for the Future, that is the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also it's supported financially by the Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports. So what we're aiming to do in this project, which started right in the middle of the pandemic, the whole negotiation started end of 2019, so pre-pandemic, shortly pre-pandemic, and then final negotiations took place during the first hard lockdown in Athens, in Greece, early 2020, and the project started in June 2020, expecting to finish in 3 years' time, funding provided. So this is a 3D story-driven, and all these words are very carefully picked, story-driven interactive exploration of the concentration camp. So not just Block 15, but also some of the buildings around it and the network of buildings within a certain part of this camp. The incorporation of historical and archival material, and I will get back to that, and I invite Anna Maria, if she has any more comments at the end of my talk, just come up and say them. And also the reconstruction of the original site based on architectural data and our own measurements as well. And this final production, as soon as it's completed, as soon as it's ready, it will be offered on strictly non-commercial, free-to-use policy. So it's just going to be out there in the open for anyone to just download and experience. These are the steps in our project, the way we've designed it. It's important for one very particular reason I would like to stress, and to us as members of the project team, this is quite important. As you can see, broadly speaking, we're talking about a 5-step project in which the very first step was something that's already been completed. That's the archival and historical research. This entailed going into archives, digital and non-digital archives as well, both in Greece and outside Greece, Germany, of course, for example. A visit to the site, so this is all, content providing steps. A visit to the site, appropriate measurements, and the like. Most of you know this. And then, of course, the interactive scenario development. I'll get back. I will talk about this step quite extensively in a bit. Modeling of assets, both movable and immovable assets. Movable assets as in the characters in the story, and immovable assets as in the buildings and the surrounding environment, and development of those assets as well. And of course, the finalization of the technical solution, which was a huge discussion because in the beginning we always knew that we wanted to develop an immersive experience, but there was this point where we were actually discussing whether the best way forward was to opt for a 3D cinematic experience, as in with real actors, not developed assets, digitally developed assets. We dropped that solution, or we sort of departed from that solution, at least for now, and we decided to go for a completely digital digitized digital option. As you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, the archival and historical research is an ongoing iterative step that comes and goes, that appears, comes and goes, and comes back again throughout every one of the other 4 steps in this project. This is because as we're dealing with an extremely sensitive and extremely difficult site, which is not just a shell, it's a carrier of stories that are themselves extremely sensitive. It was our unanimous decision to be as true and as loyal to historical facts as possible. So there was no poetic license. There would be no poetic license, and there still isn't any in this VR production. Having said that, this is not a documentary, and I'll get back to that. So let's see what the difficulties in each one of those steps. There were difficulties that we had to face and problems that we had to solve. As for the archival and historical research, those of us who have studied or are working with history, we know that there are steps to be taken, that there are methods to be followed, tools to be employed. But in this particular situation, sometimes access to the sources was not as straightforward as in other cases, and in some cases the sources weren't really there. I'll show you an example of that a little later. This image on the right-hand side, it comes from one of the sources we actually used. It's an image from another project funded by the Greek-German Fund for the Future, in which Anna Maria was also involved. That's called Memories of Occupation in Greece. This is an oral archive of testimonies of survivors of the occupation, German occupation in Greece. And this lady is called Eleni Georgada. For those of you who can actually see the sign, you can read it. I think she still is the only living survivor of Block 15 of the Haidari Concentration Camp. The building is right behind her. So this was one of the sources we used. As I said, many more, not always digital. Rights to use, reuse, and publish. These, again, not very straightforward. As you may understand, copyright issues and privacy issues had to be overcome to make sure we had access to the sources, to make sure we had access to historical facts, to make sure we were as close to truth as possible. And of course, always the same question that keeps coming up. The project's still ongoing, as I said, the extent to which we can actually be creative, given the fact that this is not, as I said, a documentary. The visit to the site was a second step, and this is a picture of the project team during the Seoul, the only visit we got to make. At the site. Anna Maria is not in this picture. She's based in Berlin, but she's the only person missing from this picture. It's not a very big team, but it's a very committed team. As I said, we did have to overcome some problems to make sure we got access to the site. We got to visit the site. That's September 2020, the picture you see here. It's situated in an active army unit, so you need to get permission from for access from the Ministry of Defense, and also go through the municipality of Haidari as well. You cannot avoid that, the municipality of that area. Multiple visits are next to impossible, because by the time you realize you need to make your next visit, just to plan it, to make sure you get the access rights, time has gone by, quite rapidly. And also COVID-19. So you can imagine that, getting to visit an active army unit during the pandemic is not an easy thing. So we only had this one visit, that was September 10, 2020, in which our developers, some of the guys you see in this picture are these guys, had to take measurements, take pictures of the inside of the building and the outside walls, the periphery walls, should I call them, the windows, as you can see, but not of the surrounding environment, because you're not allowed to take pictures of an active army unit in Athens. I don't know about Lithuania. So we have to be very careful with that. So no panoramic views, no 360s, nothing like that. The rest were just, images we got on our mobiles, without anyone seeing us, but which we couldn't really use because of low resolution. So it was basically one very intensive day's work, that visit over there. Now let's get to the scenario. It was, how should I put it? It was a no-brainer for us, and for those of us who designed the project, that this would not be a documentary. So we wouldn't be going in virtually, we wouldn't be developing a virtual visit to the site and its surrounding environments as a, so to say, guided, reconstructed space tour. We wanted the visitor, the person who actually has the mask on, the helmet on, to be made part of the story. This was, and still is, initially it was a very tricky exercise in digital storytelling. And those of you working with digital storytelling, I am sure you know how hard this can be. So we wanted a first person experience. So this is me putting the thing on. What would be my point of view? Could I be a German officer? No, I couldn't, because this is not appropriate. Obviously, we wouldn't want to have people, getting the experience of Nazi officials. What is the point in the history of the army camp that we are going to focus on was another question. Because when you only have 12 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes to tell a story, because this is the longest you can have someone with a helmet on, walking around a VR environment. Otherwise, you get people, getting seasickness and all those things. We want to avoid them, people getting dizzy. So what's the point in history we want to really focus on to make sure we tell the right story? As I said, this army camp was in function for about a year. So if we decided to place our story in the beginning of the life of this army camp, we wouldn't be able to tell, the whole history of it. I mean, because this history would be coming later. At the same time, we didn't want to place our experience right at the end of the army camp, the abandonment of the camp, because again, this was a major event, and this would, overwhelm the actual story. How do we account for the interactivity and the freedom of movement in a concentration camp? If you think about it, when you put your helmet, your casque on, and you just move around the virtual reality environment, you're usually free to go wherever you like. But what if you're in a concentration camp? You're not really free to move as you like within it. You're not a fly in the wall that, you know, can just fly to the room next door or can just land on the book on a desk. You're a prisoner. Since you're not a German officer, you're a prisoner. So what's really the idea there? And then, of course, you should have an overarching storyline, because we don't really like the term, especially when dealing with digital heritage. But this is a production that draws from gamification. It's not a game, but it does draw from gamification. So it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this was a puzzle we had to put together, a problem, a riddle we had to solve. We're very proud of the solution we gave, and our colleague Yannis Ragos and Yorgos Vousis, our colleagues, sorry, they did a pretty good job out of it, a great job out of it. So the narrative revolves around the experience of a prisoner in Block 15 during a 24-hour period. So we've compressed the 24-hour period within 12 or 14 minutes, from the morning of the 9th to the morning of the 10th of August, 1944. And I will tell you why. At that point, the concentration camp is under its second officer-in-chief. The word escapes me. So the first one, who was a very cruel German officer, is already behind us, so we can tell his story. And we're now under the second one, who is slightly milder, but not really mild. So we have a story to tell right now on the 9th and the 10th of August, but we have a story to tell about what was happening beforehand. The user of the virtual experience is the protagonist of the narrative. So as soon as you put your helmet on, you are the protagonist, who has just been transferred to the Haidari Concentration Camp from a blockade in another part of Attica. And he's appointed to work in the kitchens. Now, there was discussion again, you know, because we have quite a lot of women on the project. It's a female-led and quite a female project. Could we have a woman, the protagonist, could it be a woman? The answer was no, because women were confined to a different part of the concentration camp, and in fact they could not work in the kitchens. So we are a male prisoner. Soon enough, the user, visitor, prisoner, I know these words sound quite dodgy, but that's what they are. He takes on a mission to deliver a note from the women's block to another prisoner who is in solitary confinement in Block 15. So basically, what this part of the scenario enables us to do is interact with a woman, get a mission. Okay, so we will have a beginning, a middle, and an end in our journey. And also move from the kitchens, which was a different building in the overall army camp, movement from that building to Block 15, and then so you could actually, as a visitor or user, you could see the building as you approached it. Now the interaction, again, this is a very tricky thing. The user does interact with other prisoners, co-prisoners, as well as with German officers, soldiers of lower or higher ranking, and also witnesses. Now, the verb witness here is open to many interpretations of events significant to camp life. Some of them are recurring, some of them are just one-off, like the morning roll calls is a recurring thing. The selection of the 50 prisoners that were to be executed in Mandra, that's another side of Attica. This is an iconic event in the history of German occupation in Greece. The efforts of the prisoners' mothers to see them from afar, tortures, we can get back to that. It's a very long discussion as well. Prisoners carrying heavy stones in the courtyard, the distribution of food, other essentials by the Red Cross, and of course, the arrival of the Jews of Rhodes. I have to just make a side note here that within the Haidari camp, and of course, Block 15, according to the records, and I mean, our historical narrative tells us that there were both Christians and Jewish Greeks. So we see another here. We see another iconic event in the history of the camp, the arrival of the Jews of Rhodes. Now, there was another thing that we needed to sort out, and that was, if you are a newcomer to the Haidari camp as a user, how would you know your way around it? I mean, usually you wouldn't. So a trick that our scenario writers came up with was to be unofficially, informally allocated an older prisoner, a prisoner that had been in the camp for a while until you arrived. So he sort of takes you by the hand, more or less, and he shows you the way around and he explains things to you. So you as a user always have a second character following you around and talking to you, telling you things, telling you what to avoid, telling you that some things are dangerous, what you should do. He would prompt you, trigger you in terms of gamification to do things. So this was a trick, and we think it works quite well. And then again, we come to the step of asset modeling and development. These are very early pictures, images of the very early work of our scenario writer / illustrator, Yorgos Gousis. He's a quite well-known graphic novelist here in Greece, and our developers. So what Yorgos would do, and this takes us back to to my statement beforehand that archival and historical work is iterative and it advises continuously each step of the project. So our illustrator would illustrate the image of, say, a German officer that you can see on your left-hand side, and on your right-hand side, the developers would sort of develop the asset in its digital form. And then Anna Maria, as a historian, and other colleagues working for the project would come back and say, this doesn't look right, because, the hats were different, the belts were different, the insignia could have been different. Let us go back to the sources. Let's find out what the insignia really looked like, and we'll get back to you. And this was an ongoing thing until we finalized each and every asset. And by each and every asset, I'm not just talking about the German officers and their insignia, or the prisoners and their, worn out clothes, but also, the plates they were using or the pots they were using. As I said, part of the production is set in the kitchens. What do we know there again? These are images from archival images. I'm showing you, so you can see that the actual insignia were very particular at that period of time for particular rankings, officer rankings. So we did need to make sure that we got these right. These are not just, random images, random digital imprints on their uniforms. Far from that. And then, of course, the site modeling. Site modeling was undertaken by a separate team in our project. So people doing exactly that. That's a team led by Associate Professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business in Informatics, George Papaioannou. These are digital versions of the inside of Block 15. They do look very realistic, and in fact, these are not very good resolution images. I assure you that they do look really, really realistic. And then again, back to research. Remember when I said that, there's a certain point, that you hit when following the sources. and sticking to the sources. And then there's a point by which you have to really be creative. When George and his team, our developer colleague, started digitally building, modeling the inside of Block 15, he came up with this question to the historians. He said, what about electric cables? Were they just, very neatly nailed on the walls, like in the left-hand image, or were they less neatly nailed and let to hang? We couldn't figure it out. Is it important? I mean, for the core of the story and the atmosphere you'd like to create, no, it's not. But it is also. I mean, you really need to be as true to the facts, to the evidence as possible. So we called the Directorate of the Historical Archives of the Greek Army and asked them about the cables, not just in Block 15, but in all buildings of that period in Greece. And basically they said, we have no idea, just do as you like. So at that point we said, okay, let's be creative. The left-hand image is the inside of a part of a building in Auschwitz, in Poland. The right-hand image is a still from a quite famous movie, Son of Saul, and it's supposedly one of the most influential and most important films depicting life in concentration camps, again in Auschwitz, takes place. So you can see the difference there. We decided to go for the option of the neatly cabled walls, but this is just to show you that such a tiny detail takes so much effort from so many people to figure out how to deal with. And then we, of course, had a storyboard, because as I said, building a virtual reality production really borders with gamification. So Yorgos Goussis, our illustrator, recreated just by hand the inside of Block 15. And then, of course, gave the images to the developers to make some sense of the atmosphere, more or less, that we'd like to create. Because as I said, we had already taken measurements. That was not the point. It was the point of making the light look right, the atmosphere look like, get the feeling right. This was the inside of Block 15. That's the inside of the kitchens. Again, that's part of the storyboard created by Yorgos, and we think it would make a great graphic novel when all is said and done. These are details from the storyboard. These are storyboard details for the demo, sorry, where you can see the interaction events, the triggers, the animations described in detail. So point A is the entrance to Block 15. This is looking Block 15 from above, as you can see. Entrance is point A, and then your character, the user, stops at point B, moves at point C, which is an optional point. That's why it's not green. On to D, E, and F, and that's the end of the demo. And on either side of you, you can see the guard room on the left-hand side, room 8, 9, and 10, then 14, 13, and 12 as you move. So you can really see how we designed the flow of the experience. Again, this is the modeling of the interior of Block 15. That's nav mesh, all the proxies for light, and it's all being built in Unity. And here are the kitchens. This is the first take on the kitchens. Before I continue, I would just like to say that by the end of the first year of the project, that's July 2021, 6 months ago, we completed the production of a demo. That's just a 2.5 minute part of the experience. And we're currently working on the rest of the scenario as we speak. So this is part of the scenario that's being developed into VR as we speak. That's part of the kitchen. That's the entrance to the army camp. As you can see, again, the big signs, they're not what you would expect. Our sources are telling us that what we see in the cinema, it's not what was there in reality. No big red flags with the SS printed on them, nothing like that. Just very, modest, should I put them, boring signs like this. So this is you going into the army camp during dusk. And this is the view of Block 15, the reconstruction of Block 15 as one exits the kitchen. So you can really see Block 15 from the door of the kitchen right here. And then this is what you see once you walk out, and you will have to walk out because as I said, your mission as a user is to deliver a note to somebody that's in confinement in Block 15. Now, most of you don't speak Greek, but I'll have to show you one or two videos of our sound development, of the words that you will hear as a user. He is a Greek, quite well-known Greek actor, and here's just a bit.
Πήρες είδηση το σημείωμα που μου έδωσε πριν μια γυναίκα στο θάλαμο?
Sorry, I don't know why this happened. It shouldn't have happened.
Είναι για τον αδερφό της, τον Τάσο. Τον έχουνε στο 15 και δεν μπορεί να τον δει.
So basically what this guy just said, like, did you notice that somebody handed me a note in that room? It's for her brother Tasos. He is in confinement and she cannot see him. Another one, I'm not going to show you this, but now I am going to show you the demo that was submitted to the German embassy last July. It's low resolution where you see, as you see it here, and of course it's not 3D, so you'll just see the video.
Θα μοιράσω το συσίτιο στο μπλοκ 15. Το μπλοκ 15 είναι κρατητήριο, τόπος βασανιστήριων και απομόνωσης. Το μόνο κτίριο που έχουν αφήσει ασοβάτιστο εξωτερικά, μουχλιασμένο, αραχνιασμένο, για να μας επηρεάζουν ψυχολογικά. Το συσίτι, η σούπα του μπακάλι, ένα νερόβραστο πράγμα με όσπρια και μικρά κομματάκια αγνώστου προελεύσεως. Ακόμα και από αυτό, οι τρόφιμοι του μπλοκ έχουν το δικαίωμα να φάνε μόνο το μισό από ό,τι οι υπόλοιποι στο στρατόπεδο. Το μυαλό τους το βασανίζει η πείνα. Αντόμσκι, πέρας, μέθησος, πιωμένος από το πρωί, δέρνει με ανύπαρκτη αφορμή. Πάντοτε έχει μαζί του τα σκυλιά. Η δουλειά τους να σκίσουν σάρκες και να γλύφουν ανθρώπινο αίμα. Ο φίλος μου ο Νίκος, μαζί κάθε μέρα μοιράζουμε φαγητό σε αυτούς τους δυστυχισμένους. Πρέπει να προχωρήσουμε στο διάδρομο για να μοιράσουμε το φαγητό.
This is the soup.
Κάθε 4 άνθρωποι μια κουβέρτα. Πολλοί μάλιστα έχουν δώσει ακόμα και αυτοί τους βαριά τραυματισμένους. Συχνά συμβαίνει να κοιμούνται με τα ρούχα μουσκεμα από την αγκαρία. Δεύτερη αλλαξιά δεν υπάρχει. Πάμε τώρα την κατσαρόλα στο επόμενο κελί.
Δεν μπορώ. Γιατί εμένα, γιατί σας παρακαλώ.
Hör auf zu betteln! Steh endlich auf! Aufstehen, habe ich gesagt! Ich habe die Schnauze voll von euch! Steh endlich auf! Aufstehen! Kein Abendbrot für dich! Ihr werdet schon lernen, wer hier das Kommando hat. Ja, ihr werdet Gehorsam lernen. Was gibt's da zu sehen? Schnell weiter!
Χριστέ μου, πάλι θα μείνει νηστικός. Πόσο θα αντέξει. Πάμε στο επόμενο δωμάτιο, στο τέλος του διαδρόμου.
Okay, and all this was made in a year. Just to make a couple of notes here about what you just saw. I'm sorry for the Greek. There was just a bit of German also. It is going to be subtitled in English and in German, the whole in English, the whole production, but not the German parts. So where you hear the Greek, you can get English, you can get German as well, subtitles. This is part of our contractual obligations. But Germans are not going to be subtitled for users, not for Greek users as well, because this we thought enhances the actual experience. People being brought as prisoners in concentration camps did not necessarily or usually did not speak German. So this whole atmosphere of not knowing what the person holding a gun is telling you is again part of the experience. So no translations for the German bits. As this is an R&D project, so there's the R as well, not just the development. We did some user testing. This is an image of a person that tested the production, the demo last summer. It was carried out in June, just before we submitted the demo to the German embassy at the web computer graphics group to make sure really whether the triggers were working. To be honest, we didn't really test the actual immersion or the emotional involvement of the user, just whether the triggers were working. And of course, we have planned, because the funding is luckily ongoing through to the end, to June 2023, further user experience assessment within this time frame, within this year, also aiming at measuring emotional involvement and psychological response to the experience. So we are going to have a psychologist on board. Just before I finish, this is us. This is me on the right-hand side last summer, and the officer of our project at the German embassy, experiencing the production. It's ongoing, as I said. This is all I have to say for now. Thank you for listening, and I'm open for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Agiati. It was a very interesting talk. Personally, I really enjoyed when you explained how you created all the narrative and what was the most important things based on the historical research and how you managed to think about the experience which people who will experience this reality would how would they feel and so on. But then before the questions, may I ask Anna Maria, maybe she has something to add to your talk, or she has some other experience which she would like to share. So Anna Maria, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here, and I am also very glad to hear Agiati speaking for the project. And it's an honor to be part of this very important project. And I would like to mention only that we talk about Greece, and we normally speak about preservation of the past, but this is almost completely limited to ancient Greece. So we are a country, we live in a country, or we are citizens of a country that is obsessed with the past, but doesn't have, there is hardly any memorialization of the recent sites of memory, such as concentration camps. And as Agiati mentioned before, this is not only the case of Haidari, that it is near Athens. We have also other German concentration camps that are completely not only neglected. Agiati said before, we can't even locate them. So we have, for example, of course, Haidari was the most important and biggest SS concentration camp in Greece. But we have also another city, Thessaloniki. Many of you maybe heard about this. This is the second largest city in Greece with a concentration camp during the German occupation, the so-called Pavlos Melas, that it is today almost completely in ruins. So we are happy to have Haidari, and we are happy to use virtual reality in order to depict what it was during the German occupation. And I would also like to add and mention that Haidari is used. Agiati also told about it, but I would like to say again that it is still a camp used by the army, the Greek army. It poses many questions why, and we had to depict in our project not only the process of 1 year of the German occupation, we would also like an extension of the project in order to depict the other phases after the end of the war. We had the Civil War, and the Haidari camp was used as well during the Civil War in Greece. So we have ongoing uses in the post-war history of Greece, ongoing uses of Haidari that are completely unknown. So this is also something that adds a value to the project, because it's the first project in Greece that uses this method, VR, in order to depict the history of a site of memory. And maybe it's the only one in Europe, I don't know. Agiati is better than me in this part of immersive technologies, but I think this is very, very innovative, and I'm very, very glad that you are able to hear our very first steps during the whole process and during the pandemic. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Kostas.
Yeah, hi everyone again, and yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Anna Maria, and especially thank you, Agiatis, for such an interesting presentation. I mean, what I'm interested into, and I was thinking as you were going through presenting the interpretation strategy, and you know what this app really is and what it shows in the camp. I couldn't sort of help comparing with something in Lithuania. It's the 7th Forts Penal History Museum. It used to be a barracks, it used to be a prison in different phases, etc. So now it's a massive interpretive museum or set of collections, let's say, about different aspects of the actual fort. It's one of the forts around Kaunas that was used in these areas, Kaunas being the second largest city of Lithuania. So it's interesting because there the approach is very much informational, right? So you want to know about, for instance, the time in which the camp was used, again, like very, very much like Block 15, like a transfer camp, so people were brought there, Jewish people. So there's an exhibition on that, and all is based on the notion of biographies of people, right? So it's like stories of people, mostly with documentary material. So it's almost like a panel exhibition with different texts and different photographs that illustrate each of those particular people who were there. So here, what I saw is that you developed a completely different approach, which is very much based on replicating the sensory experience, the mundane and banal, almost sensory experience of people living in the camp, and sometimes violence, and sometimes the most poignant aspects of violence and of terror are in these mundane moments, right? in how people are served very little food, all that kind of stuff that we showed. So I was wondering if you would like to tell us a little more about, the key aspects of the experience in the camp that you thought would constitute the full experience when you build this in fullness and when it's finished. What are the things really that you feel are the most poignant things in the sensory experience of people living in the camp, in the bodily experience of being in the camp?
So if I may start, Anna Maria, basically we were looking into recreating both the tangible and the intangible aspects of the life in the camp. That's, as you know, as you all may suspect, this is not always easy. As I said, these, if they were trees, there would be different branches underneath the tangible and the intangible respectively. Under the tangible, of course, in the sensory experience, one of the key aspects would definitely have to be the feeling one gets when he enters not just a concentration camp, but a confinement building. So as I said, this is a building that was used for that particular purpose. It's claustrophobic, light comes in at different angles. This was something that we definitely wanted to get right. Interaction with German officers, of course. Now that's a risky point, because of course life in a concentration camp is a very violent experience, deathly for many of those involved. And violence is something I would like to discuss, and it's deliberate that I didn't go into too much detail during my talk. Violence and the not just depiction, but the impression we would like to make of violence on the user was a long, and still is a very long-standing discussion. We don't want to traumatize people, okay? So basically, this is not a splatter movie. This is not meant to be something gruesome, but where does one draw the line? That's key. It's one thing not to want to traumatize someone, and another thing not, hiding the truth behind, the cruelties experienced in the camp. As you saw in the demo, violence is implied. It's not hidden, it's not omitted, but it is actually implied by sounds. There are ways to, to figure things around it by sounds, by suggesting things, not really, giving them to your face. As Anna Maria was telling us when we first started discussing the project, the first officer, the first in terms of chronology, officer in command, he is called Radomski, I think was his name, is one of the villains in the history of German occupation in Greece and beyond. He was one of those guys that sort of coined fresh ways of torture, methods of torture. Some of them he coined in Haidari. Now we wouldn't want to show that. As I said, and this is of course part of our project, this is also an educational project aimed at younger demographics. So, and it's not going to be a personalized experience because simply we don't have the budget. So basically, again, violence is something that under the intangible tree, we wanted to show, but implicitly. Interaction between prisoners, this sort of code of honor between them. I think we're trying to show that quite explicitly this time in the production. I think this is pretty much it. In 14 minutes, 14 minutes can be a long time, but it's not that long, especially when you have so many stories to tell. And we didn't want to omit any of those stories. So basically, this is how we go about it. Before you ask, because people have been asking us this, there is going to be an accompanying handbook for the experience, because teachers, educators that are going to be showing this production in the classroom. We want to make sure they know what the context is really about. We want to make sure that they know, the situation of exactly the location of the camp, its distance from execution sites, Kesariani, Kosti, you know them. Basically, we want to make sure all the accompanying information is there for the user and the educators. I may be missing something, Anna Maria, but overall, these are the things we didn't want to miss. Now, we're not telling everything, but we're doing our best.
Yes, and maybe also say that another difficulty was the fact that we don't have archival sources about the camp. Because the Germans, I don't know whether you have mentioned it, Agiati, but they destroyed the archival material in September 1944. So we don't have anything at all, and we had to reconstruct the stories of prisoners through autobiographies, through oral histories, and this was our material. So another difficulty was to reconstruct the daily life of prisoners from written sources that are counted in one hand. I mean, we don't have many books. We only have 4 or 5 books of prisoners that speak about their experience. So how to reconstruct the daily life of a camp, how to give some instructions to Yorgos Goussis about how to make a uniform of a guard. Which guards did we have? The hats, everything was a very, very difficult task. And we often had to see other media such as movies, as you said, Agiati, or even had to go to eBay and see some German Nazi memorabilia that are sold everywhere in order to see how uniforms were. So this is something huge.
And as Anna Maria said, we even asked, of course, the current officers in Haidari, in the camp, because they do have an archive, they do hold an archive, whether they have images of Block 15 or the camp during 43-44, and they don't. So you don't have images, just very few pictures, and you only have as much time during one day's visit to make something out of it. So this has been a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to carry over everything, of course, because, I mean, it's what you hear. But literature is important. Obviously, films are important because they give us templates on which to think about how to represent. And in a sense, I mean, you got all these things like the cold, you know, feeling, you know, being very cold, the food, you know, going day after day, being able to have enough food. Stuff like that, I think that is very, very important in a way. Just a second question, final question. And from my side, I mean, Germans and how we represent the Germans, right? I mean, there's this kind of semantic overlaps always between things. For instance, it's the Germans, and then it's the Nazis. And the Nazis are the Germans that we see are you know, German soldiers practically, right? So they are in a very specific capacity there. Then again, what happens is today you'll have also users that are German users. We'll be sort of using this app and so these, you know, virtual visitors that are Germans, right, as well. And I was wondering how you figure this kind of challenge of not typifying the violence and Nazism and everything as somehow essentially ethno-linguistic. The moment that some of the major ways in which we experience that is really the Raus and, you know, the German language, really. So it's really like people who are Jews and others who speak Greek, right? And there's the captors and the perpetrators who speak German. So I was wondering, what, you know, if you have any thoughts on that, especially because it's a very contested area, this kind of thing, how you deal with perpetrators, how you visualize them, and how you ascribe properties to them. The moment that you really decided to go very, very frugal on them, so it's really about a sensory experience, and it's like a daily story that you're presenting.
Anna Maria, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think that the most challenging thing was not to depict Germans as robots, because we are so accustomed to see them in movies or in other cultural representations to be the brutal robots that only say rouse and so. And then we discussed with the team how to implement the brutality of German guards, but not depict violence in all its scale. So it was very, very difficult. And on the one hand, you had to avoid the cliches and the stereotypes, but on the other hand, you have the narratives of the prisoners that say that, as Agiatis said, that, for example, Kovacs was the most brutal and Radomski also was the first that implemented innovative methods of torture. So we had to avoid the stereotypical depiction of Germans, but on the other hand, we have to not to sharp the edges, but to show what was it like. And something more was that we know from the sources that, for example, Radomski, the guard, the first a notorious guard, was sent from his superiors back to Berlin because he drank a lot and he even beat some fellow guards. So he was, according to the German Act, so brutal that we had to send him back to Berlin. So I don't know whether I have answered to your question, or Agiatis, maybe you can say something about the use of language, but as to the German characters, it was hard not to avoid the brutality of the language.
Well, I think you more or less said what I wanted to say. We have testimonies, Kostis. In some cases, Fischer, we have testimonies how he looked like, oral testimonies of survivors. So we were as loyal to those testimonies as possible. Of course, you know, there are problems with digital reconstructions of faces, for example. So lip syncing is an issue. So there's a limit to how near a face you can go when you're dealing with a digital asset, right? So again, the fact that you're further away, situated as a user, you're situated further away from them, is good in many ways and bad in many other ways, because you know they all look more or less the same if you're far away, and if the light is not very strong, because block 15 only had like a few windows here and there, letting the light in very weird angles, as I said before. So the facial characteristics were tricky, yes, but not as tricky because you always have a distance, the light is not good, and so on and so forth. Now the German, that's another thing, the rouse and those words you heard and the way you heard them being uttered. Again, I agree. There's a sort of, we need to avoid even, you know, cultural appropriation in many ways. But there is another thing that's that provides a solution to this problem, Kostis, and this is the fact that exactly because we decided, and this was an executive decision, not to translate not to translate the German, we're not using as much German. Because otherwise, non-German speaking users will not be able to follow the production. So we're only limited to those words that, you know, signify the violence and the threat and the fear, but that's it. And German, okay, I mean, what can we do? German is a very particular language, as all languages are in their ways. So this is the way we're dealing with it. Not too much German, and that's the solution to the problem. Sorry, Ingrid, I was about to say something a while ago.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Agiatis, because I knew that you are in some interesting project and I was really keen to hear more about it. And you reminded me actually, basically the power of technology and how something negative like neglection of history of the site and no access could be a possibility create some technological solutions that could bring us closer to this experience. And it's really, I'm very glad about it. My question, I don't know, maybe I missed it in the beginning, but I was thinking, will it be possible to experience this 3D story in some museum, or what are you planning to do with it after the project?
As I said, it's going to be free to use. So basically, it's going to be downloadable to your own machine. If you have a helmet, you'll be able to download it online from our site the moment it's ready. It's free to use. It's no rights at all. And this, again, was part of our contractual obligations to the German state, the German embassy, and the Ministry of Culture. So yes, you'll have no problem.
So you only have to have a helmet.
And if you don't, then you can just watch it 2D, as I showed you the demo right now. But yes, it's going to be openly available, hands down.
Nice, thank you.
I see Rimvidas has a question. So.
Yes, thank you. And I have a question about further development and sustainability, because really, as I understand that in this concentration campus, you have more levels of history. It's time from civil war in Greece, probably time from dictatorship, I don't know. So did you think about development of this communicative product by different stories, by different periods? And my second question, what do you think about sustainability of your product created? Because actually we know that the virtual reality and similar technologies, we have very fastly obsolete technologies.
Yes. Well, as to the second question, this is not something we have discussed right now. It's if you're talking whether it's going to become obsolete at some point, yes, perhaps it will be. By that time, we hope that it's a short production, it's openly available, so it's going to be as widespread as possible. Besides, it's not something that you'd like, to experience, in many years to come. New technologies will come forward. I'm sure they're going to be, hopefully, not just sure, there are going to be more productions like that on sites of difficult heritage in the years to come that are going to be much more, state of art in terms of the digital. As to your first question, Rimvidas, thanks. It's all a matter of budget. Of course, we are discussing not just different ways of showcasing the tangible and intangible history of Haidari. As I said, a graph novel was in question, and it's still an option. Also, a 3D cinematic production. We've applied for further funding for that, so we may end up, with a 3D cinema production in hand, with the same scenario, perhaps with a modification and extensions required by by cinema. But that's another option. Now, moving to different periods, or as a civil war that Anna Maria mentioned, yes, by all means. And the more difficult, the better for us. Dictatorship, maybe not. It's too close for comfort still in Athens, but the civil war is on the borderline. And also, of course, other sites. Block 15, as Anna Maria pointed out and Kostis also underlined, is not the only difficult heritage building related to the German occupation in Greece. We have much more, unfortunately so. And not just in Athens, not just in Thessaloniki, in fact, other minor cities or islands as well, where deportations of Jews were iconic events. Now, all these things, we are open to discussion and to project proposals. Of course, this is a field or an area that we'd like to focus more on.
Because in case of Haidari, I think that one of maybe productive things, it could be 3D scanning of all complex from outside and inside. Actually, not only for fixation, but actually as background for 3D based products. It's for virtual realities and something, but really basing on the real scan and real environment and real interior.
That kind of a project would be fantastic, but the best part of the time frame of that project would be getting the licenses to do it. especially with block 15. It's not an easy task. I don't know if I'm wrong, Anna Maria. I think I'm not.
Thank you.
I have one more question, as I don't see any other hands raised. So, if I understood correctly from your presentation, you are stepping into a new area because you said that these objects of difficult and traumatic heritage, they are forgotten and in a way neglected. Society doesn't know about them, but you're stepping out and showing things which happened there. Are you ready for the discussions which will raise, because each object of dissonant heritage is led by huge discussions in society, at least here in Lithuania. So do you have any strategies for the negative reviews of the outcomes of your project or something like that?
Okay, Anna Maria has a lot to say about that. But before she does, the short answer to your question, Donata, is I personally am eager for these discussions and the attacks. I think we need the disruption to take things forward. Disruption can be constructive, and I really think that, you know, raising such discussion, whether we can use gamification methods, we can employ gamification methods in difficult heritage, is a discussion that's timely and it's important. Even if we decide we shouldn't be using gamification, it's important that we actually discuss it beforehand. Not just, you know, throw it to the garbage bin without actually considering it. That's one thing. The other is, yes, of course, we have faced criticism, not as extensively because, you know, the project is not out there for everyone to see, although our site, one can find the demo on our site, for example. We have got some criticism, and before I ask Anna Maria to tell us a bit more about it, I gave a talk about this project while it was still in design at the University of California at Berkeley, and there was this question by a Jewish woman. She herself, you know, identified herself as a female Jewish architect. She's an academic there, and she said, "Why would you do that? Why would you do such a project? Is there a point in actually, you know, undertaking such a project?" And I said, you know, can I answer with a question? And she said, yes, of course. And I said, why would you film Schindler's List? Why? Is there a point in pointing out the experiences of people, you know, surrounding this story? Yes, there is. So there's a point in our project as well. I mean, it's the same answer. We need to bring forth these stories. We need to bring forth these sides of memory. And even if we decide that this was not a good idea, it's always good to try. And of course, technology allows us to do that. It's something that we can deconstruct and reconstruct all over and over and over again. So that's my answer. Sorry, Anna Maria has been the subject of quite a lot of criticism surrounding this topic.
It has to do more with the project Memories of the Occupation in Greece, because there was a lot of debate in Greece concerning this oral history project, and it is still an ongoing debate that has to do with the, I would say, the traumatic memory of the occupation, that it is still being recalled in Greece, and especially after the economic crisis. So we have of course, the anti-German feelings that are intensified, particularly at places of atrocities, and the occupation period memories are coming back after 2009, and the whole discussion with the reparations and so on. But I don't want to go deeper to this. I only want to say that, of course, the retrieval of the occupation memory and the symbolic dimension of the memory of the war are constantly used today in public, are publicly used, especially in the places that we call places of public history, newspapers, open debates in Facebook. These are the times of crisis, And in times of crisis, always we have to go back to the past and find the answers. So I would say that we don't have any criticism yet about our project, but I am sure that if there is going to be a serious debate, it's going to be about the uses of technologies and especially virtual reality as a method to depict atrocities of the past. And this is a very interesting discussion that it is still it's an ongoing discussion in Europe and worldwide, what to do with concentration camps and the use of technology in these spaces and places of memory. It is highly fascinating for me. If we leave behind the typical fixation with anti-German sentiments and go elaborate a little bit more on the use of technology concerning these places. It would be nice to have a serious discussion, and I anticipate it such as Agiatis does.
I'm sure that there will be discussion. So I see Ingrida has...
yes, one more question. Just I was wondering, do you think the site would be ever open to the public as a museum? No.
No. The previous government tried to make some steps towards that. They stopped. So the very short answer is just no. Hopefully, but no.
At least not in the near future.
No. I mean, it's within an army camp, an active army unit, and it falls under the Ministry of Culture. I mean, try to figure how difficult this can be in Greek terms.
But it looks more like historical object rather than army object.
It is. It wasn't used until the mid-80s in actual use. So it's only 30 years that's been, not in use and hence not, further, altered or damaged. So yes, it would take a lot of effort and a lot of drive from a lot of people from different, backgrounds to make sure this happens. So I would say just
not an easy task.
Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat and no more hands raised. So I think we're about to end this very interesting and, for me personally, very inspiring lecture, because for a while I thought about using these immersive technologies in the museums here in Lithuania, but this gamification approach really widens the possibilities of interacting with visitors. I think it's a very nice example of how should these technologies be used and can be used in the exhibitions of museums to show even more than you can do by showing just views on virtual reality or just landscapes or old interiors or something like that. So thank you very much, Agiati. Thank you very much, Anna Maria, for joining us. And for all the participants, I would really like to invite you to follow news on Vilnius University Faculty of Communication Facebook and to follow our other lectures and discussions. I think they will be as interesting as this one was. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.